The Cascade Mountains wore a crown of mist that morning, the early sun struggling to pierce the dense gray veil stretched across the rugged peaks. Deep in the folds of this untamed wilderness, a modest cabin sat tucked between towering pines and moss-draped firs. Smoke drifted lazily from the stone chimney, hinting at a fire already burning within. Inside, Daniel Mercer stirred. 41 years old, with a body weathered by time and solitude, he moved through the familiar ritual of his mornings. His tall frame hunched slightly as he tugged on a forest-green flannel shirt, the fabric faded and soft from countless washes. Dark brown hair streaked with premature gray framed a face that once bore a ready smile but now carried the quiet heaviness of a man who had lived through more loss than he'd ever speak aloud. Hazel eyes, keen and steady, stared back at him from the cracked bathroom mirror. He filled an old kettle with water and set it on the wood stove, listening to it begin to hiss and rattle. Coffee grounds waited in a chipped enamel mug, their bitter promise of comfort hanging in the air. Outside, the forest woke slowly, branches creaking under the weight of dew, a few early birds testing the silence with cautious calls. Daniel lived for this hush, for the space it gave him to breathe without expectation. Stepping out onto the porch, he inhaled deeply. The air was sharp, clean, carrying the scent of wet earth and evergreen resin. It filled his lungs like a tonic. He rubbed the sleep from his stubbled jaw and leaned against the porch railing, letting the morning seep into him. That's when he saw it. A massive shape stood just beyond the boundary where the clearing met the trees. At first, it was only a shadow among shadows, something easily dismissed as a trick of the light. But then the shadow moved, lumbering forward with a slow, shuddering step. Daniel's breath caught. A bear. A black bear, huge, with matted fur that clung in clumps to her sides, her frame gaunt as if she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Ice crusted her coat, and her massive chest heaved with each breath. She wasn't posturing. She wasn't growling. She simply stood there, her paws sunk deep into the muddy ground, her head low. Every instinct screamed at Daniel to retreat, to slam the door and grab the shotgun mounted by the doorframe. Instead, he remained still, transfixed by the raw emotion radiating from the animal. There was something more here than fear. Something deeper, something that brushed against the part of Daniel's soul he thought had long since withered. And then he saw why. Clutched gently in the bear's jaws, like a mother carrying her newborn, was a small, limp body. A cub. A baby bear, no larger than a medium-sized dog, its chocolate-brown fur matted with blood and dirt, its limbs dangling lifelessly. Daniel's heart twisted. The mother bear stepped onto the porch, her great weight making the old boards groan. She moved with painful slowness, each step deliberate, almost reverent. She stopped just a few feet from Daniel, her amber eyes locking onto his with a depth of sorrow that hit him harder than any human plea could have. In those eyes, Daniel didn't see a wild animal. He saw a mother. Broken. Desperate. Begging for help in the only way she knew how. The kettle inside began to shriek, its whistle splitting the heavy silence, but Daniel didn't move. Neither did the bear. They stood suspended in that fragile moment, two creatures caught between instinct and understanding. He opened his mouth, a soundless question forming on his lips, but the bear answered first. She lowered her head slowly, and with a trembling gentleness that shattered Daniel's composure, she laid the tiny, battered cub at his feet. Then she backed away, sitting heavily on her haunches, her breathing rough and ragged. She didn't roar. She didn't charge. She simply waited, her eyes never leaving the man who now held her whole world in his hands. Daniel Mercer, once a man running from the pain of connection, now stood at a crossroads that he had never expected to find in the lonely wilds of Washington. And somewhere, deep in the marrow of his bones, he knew. This was no accident. This was a call he was meant to answer. The kettle continued to wail behind him, but Daniel didn't hear it anymore. He knelt. And the story began. Daniel's knees creaked as he lowered himself onto the porch floorboards, inching closer to the tiny bear cub. Every movement was deliberate, slow, cautious. The mother bear remained still a few yards away, her chest rising and falling heavily, her huge paws digging into the mud with barely restrained anxiety. The cub didn't move. Daniel extended a hand, his fingers trembling slightly. He hesitated just above the cub's body, feeling the soft warmth of its shallow breaths against his skin. Relief prickled at the corners of his eyes. The little one was still alive, barely. Carefully, Daniel slid his hands beneath the cub's limp form. The fur was damp, tangled with dirt and blood, the small body frighteningly light. He could feel each rib pressing against the thin hide, the faint, rapid heartbeat fluttering under his palms like a bird trapped in a storm. He gathered the cub into his arms, cradling it against his chest. The flannel fabric of his shirt absorbed the cold and wet instantly, but he didn't care. His own breath came in shaky gasps, his heart hammering so hard he wondered if the mother bear could hear it. He glanced up. The mother bear hadn't moved, but her amber eyes followed his every action. There was no growl, no flash of teeth, only a gaze so full of raw, desperate hope that it made Daniel's throat ache. It was a look he recognized. He had seen it once before in the hospital waiting room, the night his wife's heart gave out despite everything the doctors tried. The silent pleading for a miracle. Daniel rose slowly, murmuring softly under his breath, nonsense words, more for himself than for her. The bear's ears twitched at the sound, but she remained seated, unmoving, as if she understood that to help her child, she had to trust the man before her. Holding the cub close, Daniel backed toward the door of his cabin. Every step felt like walking a tightrope, every creak of the porch a reminder of how easily this fragile piece could shatter. But the mother made no move to follow. She simply sat, her massive body sagging as though every ounce of strength had been spent getting her baby to this doorstep. Daniel reached the door, fumbled with the latch, and slipped inside, cradling the tiny, battered life against his heart. The door closed with a quiet click, shutting out the mist, the mountains, and the mother waiting just beyond the threshold. Inside, the battle to save a life was about to begin. Inside the dim warmth of the cabin, Daniel set the cub gently on the braided rug in front of the fireplace. The tiny creature lay motionless, its breathing shallow and erratic. Daniel's hands hovered uncertainly for a moment before he sprang into action, driven by instinct more than knowledge. He kicked the fire up, adding another log and stirring the embers until fresh flames roared to life, pushing back the chill that clung to the air. Grabbing an armful of towels from a trunk near the kitchen, he built a small, soft nest near the fire's warmth. He placed the cub carefully atop it, wrapping the little body snugly without pressing too hard against its fragile chest. The cub whimpered, a faint sound that barely registered, but it was enough. Daniel's heart surged with a raw mix of terror and hope. He crouched beside the tiny bear, whispering under his breath like a prayer, though he hadn't prayed in years. "You're safe now, little guy. Just hang on." The room smelled of wet fur and wood smoke, a sharp and earthy scent that somehow felt sacred. Daniel wiped his damp palms on his jeans and forced himself to think. The cub needed warmth, hydration, basic things, but things that might mean the difference between life and death. He moved quickly to the kitchen. His battered old kettle still sat atop the wood stove, forgotten. He poured steaming water into a thick ceramic bowl, then wrapped it in another towel to create a makeshift heating pad. He set it beside the cub, careful not to let it touch the fragile skin directly. The bear cub twitched slightly, its nose wrinkling as it sensed the new warmth. Daniel smiled grimly. It wasn't much, but it was something. He pulled his ancient flip phone from the shelf above the sink. No signal. Of course. In this remote pocket of the Cascades, you were lucky if you caught a wisp of reception on a clear day standing on the roof. That meant no calls for help, no vet rushing to the rescue. He'd have to do this on his own. Turning back to the cub, he noticed for the first time just how bad the little bear's condition was. The back leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, a wound crusted with dried blood wrapped around one tiny paw. Bruises darkened the soft belly fur, and the ribs jutted sharply through the matted coat. Anger and sorrow warred inside Daniel. He didn't know what had happened to this little one out there in the forest, but he could guess. Nature was brutal. Perhaps the cub had fallen, or maybe something worse, a rogue male bear, a predator looking for an easy meal. Whatever the cause, the mother bear had crossed into a human's world to seek a miracle. Daniel blew out a breath, his hands steadying as he refocused. He had no right to fail them now. He remembered an old trick he'd learned photographing wildlife in Alaska. A mix of honey and warm water could sometimes coax strength into an injured animal too weak for anything else. Scrambling through his pantry, he found a dusty jar of raw honey tucked behind cans of beans and corn. He mixed a small batch with warm water in a clean measuring cup, then filled a plastic syringe from an old first aid kit. Returning to the cub's side, he eased a few drops of the sweet liquid into the bear's mouth. At first, nothing. Then, slowly, the tiny pink tongue flickered out, tasting the honey water. A flicker of life stirred in the cub's hollowed eyes. Daniel smiled through a tight throat, a smile that felt rusty from disuse. Outside the window, through the haze of fog, the shadow of the mother bear still waited. The world outside was wild and cruel, but here inside this small cabin, for this fragile moment, hope stubbornly took root. The minutes dragged into hours as Daniel hovered over the cub, administering tiny drops of honey water every few minutes. Each small movement from the little bear felt like a victory, each faint twitch a breath of hope in the thick uncertainty that clouded the room. Night crept in swiftly, wrapping the cabin in deep, inky shadows. The only light came from the crackling fireplace and a small oil lamp that flickered bravely on the table. Daniel stayed at the cub's side, too wired with fear to even consider sleep. The mother bear's silhouette remained at the edge of the clearing, a silent sentinel against the misty darkness. Daniel adjusted the towels, careful not to disturb the fragile bear too much. He could feel the heat returning to its small body, a sign that the makeshift warming pads were doing their job. But still, the cub's breathing was shallow, and its back leg remained stiff and awkwardly bent. The injuries were serious, beyond what he could fix alone. He found himself speaking softly to the cub, telling it stories without realizing it. Stories about his late wife, about the wild places they had traveled together, about how she had once nursed an injured fox back to health with nothing but patience and a stubborn refusal to give up. "You're a fighter, little guy," Daniel murmured, brushing a gentle hand over the cub's head. "You've got a mama out there who crossed a whole mountain just to find you help. You're not allowed to give up. Not yet." The cub stirred slightly at his touch, a soft, barely audible whimper escaping its throat. Daniel's chest tightened. That small sound, that tiny plea for life, fueled his resolve even more. He sat back against the wall, rubbing tired eyes with the heels of his hands. The old ache in his heart, the one he thought would never heal, throbbed in rhythm with the cub's labored breaths. He couldn't fail this tiny creature. He wouldn't. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose panes in the window frames. The forest beyond remained cloaked in silence, save for the occasional low, rumbling huff of the waiting mother bear. Inside, Daniel stayed vigil, determined to keep that fragile spark of life burning through the long, uncertain night. Whatever it took. Morning crept into the cabin slowly, its light gray and uncertain, as if unsure it wanted to reveal what the night had left behind. Daniel, slumped in the old rocking chair near the fire, stirred at the first hint of dawn. His back ached from the awkward position, but he snapped awake with a jolt of fear, his eyes darting to the small bundle near the hearth. The cub still breathed, shallow, but steady. Daniel let out a shaky sigh, relief flooding through him like a warm tide. But he knew survival wasn't guaranteed, not yet. His mind went immediately to Dr. Alyssa Monroe. He rose stiffly, grabbing the flip phone from the table and stepping outside. The air was bitingly cold, his breath steaming as he climbed up onto the old stump near the cabin's edge, the only place he sometimes caught a cell signal. He raised the phone, waited, prayed. 1 bar. Flickering. It was enough. He punched in the number from memory, his fingers stiff with cold and tension. The call connected on the second ring. Daniel? What in the world? Alyssa, I don't have time. I've got a bear cub. Hurt bad. The mother brought him to me. There was a pause, then a slow, measured response. A cub? A wild one? Yes, he rasped. She's right outside. She left him here. I can't get to a clinic, and he's barely holding on. I need to know what to do. Alyssa, always calm under pressure, shifted into professional mode. First thing, keep him warm. You're doing that? Yeah. Heat, towels, honey water. His breathing's weak. He's got a broken back leg, maybe worse. No external bleeding, but a nasty gash on the paw. Okay, she said. Do not give him solid food yet. He won't be able to digest it. Keep doing small amounts of honey water every 15 minutes if he tolerates it. Focus on hydration and body heat. Daniel's mind raced, absorbing every word. I'll call Ginny Harper, Alyssa added. She used to run a wildlife rehab center before she retired out here. We'll grab supplies and head up to you. Give us a few hours. Thank you, Daniel said, his voice cracking. You did the right thing calling me, Daniel. Keep him stable. We're coming. The line went dead. Daniel climbed down, shoving the phone back into his pocket. As he turned toward the cabin, he caught sight of her, the mother bear. She was still there. Still waiting. Her massive head lifted slightly, as if sensing the change, the faint stirrings of help coming. Daniel nodded once, a silent promise across the cold, misty air. He hurried back inside, closing the door against the icy wind. The little cub stirred weakly in his nest of towels, his small body twitching in sleep or pain, Daniel couldn't tell. But it didn't matter. Help was on the way. He just had to keep fighting, just a little longer. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes with slow, hollow clicks as Daniel knelt once more beside the tiny cub. The fire blazed high in the hearth now, throwing waves of comforting heat across the room. Daniel dipped the plastic syringe into the cup of honey water he had warmed, drawing up a small amount with steady hands. Come on, little fighter, he murmured. He touched the tip gently to the cub's mouth. For a moment, there was no response. Then, the cub's tongue flicked out sluggishly, tasting the offering. Daniel dribbled a few more drops in, careful not to overwhelm the fragile throat. The cub's jaw moved in a weak attempt at swallowing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ignite a new burst of hope. He shifted to sit cross-legged, stretching his sore back, and kept talking softly. His voice filled the cabin, soothing the fearful quiet. He told the cub about the cabin, about the creek that ran a few hundred yards down the hill, about the way the mist rolled in every evening like a ghostly river. He spoke as though the little bear could understand, because maybe, in some way, it did. Hours slipped by. Every few minutes, Daniel repeated the routine, checking the cub's temperature with his fingertips, offering small drops of honey water, adjusting the blankets to trap more heat. Outside, the world brightened, the mist lifting slowly to reveal the sharp outlines of the surrounding trees. From the kitchen window, Daniel spotted the mother bear still sitting motionless among the ferns, her thick black coat dusted with frost. She looked like a carving out of ancient stone, silent, eternal, watching. A soft knock at the door startled Daniel from his trance. He blinked and rose, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He pulled open the door. Alyssa Monroe stood there, bundled against the cold in a heavy down parka, her curly hair tucked into a knit cap. Beside her was a woman Daniel didn't know, short, wary, with a veterinarian's calm urgency in her sharp green eyes. She carried 2 heavy duffel bags that clanked with the sound of metal instruments and medicine bottles. "You're a hard man to find," Alyssa said, managing a smile as she stepped inside. "This is Ginny Harper."
"Show us," Ginny said without preamble. Daniel led them to the fireplace. Ginny knelt immediately, her practiced hands moving expertly over the tiny bear. She checked its gums, pressed fingers to its belly, tested the angle of the broken leg with careful precision.
"He's a tough little guy," she said finally, glancing up at Daniel. "But it's gonna be a rough road." "Whatever it takes," Daniel said, voice low and firm. Ginny nodded approvingly. She began pulling supplies from her bag: antibiotics, syringes, splints, bandages. As they worked, Daniel moved to the window once more. The mother bear was still there. Still waiting. Still trusting. Inside that small, battered cabin tucked away in the mountains, a life that the world had nearly discarded was being fought for with every ounce of strength they had. And outside, a mother's silent vigil continued. The afternoon faded into a gentle gray as Ginny finished splinting the cub's broken leg. She worked swiftly but tenderly, murmuring reassurances that seemed more for herself than for the sleeping bundle before her. Daniel stood nearby, hovering, feeling useless and yet unable to tear his eyes away. "There," Ginny said finally, securing the last strip of gauze. "It's not perfect, but it'll hold until he's strong enough for more serious treatment." Daniel knelt beside her. "What else does he need?" "Rest," Alyssa answered from the kitchen, where she was mixing a special nutrient solution. "Warmth. Fluids. Antibiotics for that paw wound." Ginny nodded. "And time. Lots of time." Daniel exhaled slowly, a deep ache unwinding from his chest. Bruno, he decided suddenly. The cub needed a name. Bruno had a fighting chance. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was more hope than he'd had just 24 hours ago. He stayed by Bruno's side long after Ginny and Alyssa packed up their gear. They had decided not to move the cub to a rehab facility just yet. The bond between Bruno and his mother was too strong, and uprooting him now might do more harm than good. Besides, no rehab center could offer the one thing he still needed most: his mother's silent, unwavering watch. As the evening deepened, Daniel found himself drawn outside once more. He pulled on a thick jacket and stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking softly beneath his boots. The air smelled of pine sap and the fading embers of distant campfires. She was still there. The mother bear. Sitting just beyond the reach of the porch light, her silhouette a black monolith against the silver-streaked trees. She didn't move when he approached the edge of the steps, didn't growl or shift her massive weight. She simply watched him with those deep, ancient eyes. Daniel felt something rise in his throat, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Gratitude. Awe. Maybe even a little bit of forgiveness toward a world that had taken so much from him and now, against all logic, given something precious back. He crouched at the edge of the porch, making himself small, non-threatening. "He's still with us," he said softly, his voice barely more than a breath in the cold air. "He's tough. Like you." The bear's ears twitched. She lowered her head slightly, not quite a bow, but close enough that it made Daniel's heart twist. He stayed there for a long while, just breathing, just sharing the night with her. Eventually, the bear shifted, rising onto her powerful legs with a fluid, weary grace. She took a few steps closer, not threatening, just closing the distance by inches. Daniel's heart thudded painfully against his ribs. His mind screamed warnings, but he didn't move. He simply sat there, his hands resting palms up on his knees, showing her he meant no harm.
The bear stopped a few yards away, sniffing the air. She raised her head, her breath misting in the cool night, and then, slowly, she turned and melted back into the forest, her dark shape swallowed by the trees.
Daniel watched her go, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. Inside the cabin, Bruno whimpered softly in his sleep, a small, broken sound that tugged at Daniel's heart. He stood slowly, brushing the dirt from his jeans, and stepped back inside. He stoked the fire higher, making sure the cabin stayed warm through the long night ahead. The cub stirred, shifting under the blankets, and Daniel sat back down beside him.
He had made a promise, to himself, to the mother bear, to the battered little soul lying before him.
Whatever it took, he would see it through. The next few days unfolded in a quiet rhythm, each hour a fragile thread holding together the delicate miracle Daniel was fighting for. Bruno's breathing grew stronger, steadier. His eyes opened now and then, glassy and dazed, but alive. Daniel fed him tiny sips of nutrient-rich formula, following Alyssa and Ginny's instructions down to the last detail. Each time Bruno moved, even slightly, his paw twitching, his ears flicking, Daniel's heart lifted. But with each step forward came a growing ache in his chest. He was getting attached. Deeply. He tried not to name it, but it clung to everything: the way he gently wiped Bruno's fur with a warm cloth, the way he spoke to him softly before bed, the way he reached out instinctively if the cub whimpered in his sleep. Outside, the mother bear returned like clockwork. Every morning she was there before sunrise, and every evening she disappeared into the trees as dusk fell. She never tried to approach. She never acted out. She simply watched. Daniel began leaving out offerings near the edge of the clearing: trout from the nearby stream, handfuls of berries, even water in an old metal dish. Sometimes she took them. Sometimes she didn't. But she always stayed. One morning, as Daniel opened the door to check on her, he found something that stopped him cold. A small, neat pile of pine cones had been placed at the edge of the porch. Arranged almost delicately, like a gift. He stared at them, dumbfounded, until the meaning sank in. It wasn't just a waiting game for the bear anymore. It was gratitude. A silent thank you. Daniel crouched and picked one up, rubbing the rough texture between his fingers. He looked up, across the clearing, and saw her watching from behind the trees. He nodded once, his throat tight. Back inside, Bruno was stirring, shifting his weight for the first time with a little more confidence. Daniel hurried to his side, helping him adjust, whispering calm words of reassurance. As Bruno settled again with a soft huff, Daniel sat back and let out a long, quiet breath. They were healing, one paw, one heart, one unspoken promise at a time. The knock came just after noon on a cloudless day. Daniel had just finished feeding Bruno, who now sat upright in his towel nest, eyes brighter than they'd ever been. The cub was still weak, his splinted legs stiff and awkward, but he had started playfully batting at Daniel's fingers with his good paw. It was a small joy, watching life return.
But that joy faded the moment Daniel opened the door.
Deputy Carla Brenner stood on the porch, clipboard in hand, her brown uniform pressed crisp beneath a quilted vest. She was polite, efficient, and the kind of woman who didn't enjoy surprises. Behind her, parked just off the gravel road, was a state-issued SUV. "Afternoon, Mr. Mercer," she said with a tight smile. "I'm here on behalf of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. We received a report about a wild bear cub being cared for on private property. Mind if I come in?"
Daniel didn't move. His jaw tightened, but he stepped aside.
Bruno, oblivious, gave a soft whimper from his nest by the fire. Carla paused as soon as she spotted him. "Well, I'll be damned." Daniel shut the door behind her. "He's hurt. Bad. I've had help from a vet. The mother brought him here. Laid him right on my porch." She studied the cub for a long moment, then glanced out the window. "That's her, isn't it? Out there in the trees. She's been watching since the moment she left him." Carla exhaled slowly, pulling a pen from her jacket. "You understand this puts everyone in a difficult position. We don't usually allow wild rehabilitation without permits, especially with apex species. The cub should have been reported immediately. I didn't have cell service, Daniel said. And he wouldn't have made it through the night if I hadn't acted. You can ask Dr. Monroe. I already did, she replied, checking her clipboard. She and that Harper woman gave you glowing praise. Said the cub would be dead if it weren't for your quick thinking. But that doesn't mean we can look the other way. Daniel folded his arms. What happens now? Carla hesitated. They want to take him. Relocate him to a rehab center near Yakima. And, they're considering relocating the mother bear too. She's too comfortable around humans. Could be a danger. Daniel felt as though the ground dropped beneath his feet. He looked over at Bruno, who had curled back up, drowsy and warm, completely unaware that his fate was now in someone else's hands. No, he said quietly. No. That's not right. She didn't wander into a backyard or attack someone's chickens. She brought him here. She asked for help. Carla shifted uncomfortably. I know. I get it, I really do. But rules are rules. I can stall for 3 days. After that, they'll come get him. Daniel nodded slowly, jaw clenched. That night, as Bruno slept beside the fire, Daniel sat alone at the table, staring into the dark. The logs crackled, sending occasional sparks into the hearth, but he didn't hear them. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't keep Bruno forever. He couldn't force him into a life between 4 walls. He had saved him. That was enough. And now, he had to give him back to the only world he truly belonged to. The one that was wild. The one that was waiting just beyond the trees. The sky was still painted in soft lavender when Daniel loaded the crate into the back of his pickup truck. The forest was quiet, too quiet, as if the world itself held its breath for what was about to happen. Bruno lay inside the crate, bundled in his favorite flannel blanket, with a small pouch of berries and an old tennis ball tucked beside him, his strange little comforts from his brief life indoors. Daniel had lined the bottom with pine needles and moss, trying to make it feel more like the forest he'd soon return to. He didn't look back at the cabin as he pulled away from the clearing. The gravel road wound through the trees, each bend more remote than the last. Daniel took them slowly, eyes flicking to the side mirror where he could just make out Bruno's fuzzy form shifting with the motion of the truck. A few times, the cub let out a soft whine, not quite fear, just confusion. Maybe sadness. Daniel gripped the wheel tighter. He didn't have a specific destination, only a feeling, a direction. He followed old logging roads, long overgrown, navigating by instinct and memory. After an hour, he reached a wide meadow at the base of a thickly wooded slope. A shallow creek trickled along the edge, and claw marks on nearby tree trunks hinted that bears passed through here often. It felt right. Daniel parked and killed the engine. The silence rushed in, complete and deafening. He stepped out and opened the crate slowly. Bruno blinked at the light, confused, then sniffed the air. "This is home, little guy," Daniel whispered. "Where you're supposed to be." He crouched beside the crate and unlatched the door, leaving it open. Bruno didn't bolt. He stayed curled in the blanket for a moment longer, then crawled forward cautiously, placing one paw outside, then the other. The cub looked back. Daniel met his eyes and smiled, even as his throat tightened. "Go find her." Bruno hesitated, then turned slowly toward the trees. And that's when Daniel heard it. A low rustle. A huff of breath. He stood, heart hammering. At the far end of the meadow, framed by the trees, she appeared. The mother bear. Watching. Waiting. She stood there like a statue carved from shadow, massive, still, her breath fogging the cool morning air. Daniel didn't move. Neither did she. Only Bruno, caught between them, shifted his weight uncertainly, his nose twitching as he caught her scent. Then she let out a low, soft sound, part grunt, part growl. A mother's voice. Bruno froze. Daniel held his breath. The cub turned, looking once more at Daniel. His small body trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of something he couldn't understand, belonging to two worlds, even if only for a moment. Then he made his choice. He padded forward, slow at first, then faster, his awkward gait carrying him across the meadow toward the waiting shape in the trees. The mother bear stepped forward, meeting him halfway, her enormous frame folding down as she lowered her head to sniff him thoroughly. She circled him, nudging him gently with her nose, checking every inch as if to confirm that it was really him, that he was really alive. When she was satisfied, she licked his head once, a broad swipe that made the cub stumble slightly, then pulled him close with a massive paw. Daniel's vision blurred. He took a step back, giving them space, watching the reunion unfold with a quiet ache in his chest that was part heartbreak, part joy. Then, just as he turned to leave, something stopped him. Bruno turned around. He looked back at Daniel, eyes wide, ears perked. The moment stretched, the way time sometimes does when a goodbye carries more weight than words can hold. And then the cub did something Daniel would never forget. He ran back. Only a few steps, but he pressed his head gently against Daniel's leg, nuzzling once before backing away. Daniel knelt, brushing his hand gently over the cub's soft fur one last time. "Go," he whispered. "You're where you belong." Bruno turned, and this time he didn't look back. The mother bear gave Daniel a long, steady look. Then, in the soft rustle of underbrush and quiet thuds of paws, they vanished together into the trees. Daniel stood alone in the meadow, the silence of the forest returning like a soft sigh around him. But something had changed.
He felt it deep in his bones.
He had let go.
And in doing so, he had healed.
Autumn came early that year in the Cascades. The trees flared with crimson and gold, and the air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves and approaching frost. Daniel returned to his quiet cabin, but nothing about it felt quite the same. The first thing he did was gather the blankets and the worn-out flannel shirt Bruno had claimed as his own. He folded them carefully, pressing the faded fabric to his face for a moment before placing them in a wooden chest in the attic. He left the crate outside, scrubbed clean, but with scratches that told a story. The tennis ball, too, its rubber chewed and faded, he placed on the mantel, just above the hearth. Days passed, and Daniel tried to fall back into old routines. He chopped wood, hiked to the creek, read books he'd already read twice before. But the cabin, once a refuge of peace, now echoed with something else: memory, presence, the weight of something that had mattered. He began writing again. The first few pages came slow, his fingers unsure on the keyboard. But then the words began to flow like the thawed river in spring. He wrote about Bruno. About the mother bear. About the night he found them, and the days that followed, the quiet miracle that had changed him. His manuscript grew into something alive, something that felt bigger than just a journal or a tale. It felt like purpose.
Weeks rolled into months.
Then, one morning, as October painted the world in muted fire, Daniel stepped out onto the porch with a cup of coffee in hand. The chill bit at his fingers. He took a sip, then stopped cold. At the edge of the clearing, in the exact place the mother bear had waited, sat something small and unexpected. A cluster of fresh berries. Ripe and red, perfectly placed in a small pile. Daniel stepped forward slowly. He crouched, studying them. There were no tracks. No disturbed leaves. Just the offering, neat, intentional. He looked toward the forest, but saw nothing. Still, he knew. A smile crept over his face, unbidden and full of warmth. Every fall after that, it happened again. Sometimes berries. Sometimes pine cones. Once, a smooth stone shaped like a heart. each left in the same place, silent tokens of remembrance. People came and went from Daniel's life, neighbors, a few readers when the book was published under the title The Cub Who Came Knocking. They asked about the carved wooden bear that now sat on the corner shelf, its small eyes gleaming beneath a hand-painted coat of black and brown. He always smiled and said, "It's just a souvenir from the mountains." But in his heart, he knew better. That bear represented a moment that had stitched something back together in him, something that had been fraying for years. Not because he had saved a wild animal, but because, in that act of care, in that deep wordless trust, something had reached out and saved him too. Sometimes healing doesn't roar. Sometimes it comes soft-pawed, half-frozen, and carried in the jaws of a desperate mother. Daniel had learned that love wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go when the time came. And still remembering. Always remembering. In a world that often rushes by in noise and distraction, this story reminds us of something quietly powerful: compassion does not require words. It requires presence, patience, and the courage to respond when instinct says, "Walk away." Daniel could have closed the door that morning. The bear could have chosen fear over trust. But instead, both chose connection. And in that choice, they reminded us of a truth we often forget: healing is not always about fixing. Sometimes, it's about witnessing, caring, and letting go with love. In life, we all carry invisible wounds. Some, like Bruno's, are clear and urgent. Others, like Daniel's, are buried deep within. But no matter how different we seem on the surface, human or animal, wild or tamed, the act of caring for another can light a path back to ourselves. At Paw Prints and Stories, we believe these moments matter. They remind us that kindness crosses species, that love isn't limited by language, and that sometimes, the most important thing we can do is show up and say, "You're not alone." If this story touched you, we invite you to become part of our journey. Subscribe to Paw Prints and Stories, where each tale brings us closer to the bond between hearts, human and animal alike. And here's our challenge to you. What would you do if someone, wild, broken, or voiceless, showed up at your door? Would you turn away? Or would you kneel down, like Daniel did, and say, "I'll try"? The next story might begin with your answer.